What's up, everyone? Jason Gelbo here, taking a look at some pitchers for 13-game slate. FanDuel DraftKings, a lot of arms going tonight. I mean, it'd be nice if they maybe spare us some throughout the weekend, but we got Clayton Kershaw, Johnny Cueto, Noah Syndergaard all going tonight. So kind of breaking down where we get the pricing differences between the sites. I mean, we can talk about some, could talk about some pivots because there are some noticeable differences. And we'll also talk about a couple of cheap guys you can look to pair up as well. First game, Cardinals and Yankees. Michael Wacha versus Masahiro Tanaka. Wacha looks pretty good in his first start against Cincinnati. Heads into Yankee Stadium tonight. Yankees 4.5 run total. Cardinals are underdogs. I'm not particularly thrilled with Wacha. Not to say that I don't think he's going to have a bad start, but I just don't think it's going to be good enough for me to really consider on a slate where you're going to need some upside. You just look at Wacha. Really, I mean, on this slate, right, 16th in K percentage, with guys with, 4 guys north of 25% tonight. I mean, I'm just looking for a little bit more. And given that, I'm kind of off of Wacha, even at a cheaper price. Tanaka, on the other hand, I mean, this Cardinals offense really isn't anything special. They do get a bump moving into Yankee Stadium. And with that being said, I do think a couple other guys are in play. The 1 through 5, adding Matt Adams into a lineup against a right-hander is still a little bit it gives it a little bit of a bump. It's better than having Yadier Molina and Johnny Peralta hitting 5th and 6th. They just scoot down the order. Do I think Tanaka can have a decent start? Yes. Do I think it's viable on tonight's slate? Probably not. Moving on here, Baltimore-Toronto, Aaron Sanchez versus Wade Miley. Looking at Wade Miley, I know this Toronto team has been bad against lefties. I mean, they're still a top team to really kind of not really target against. I mean, even with Josh Donaldson out of the lineup, I still think Steve Pearce, Jose Bautista, Troy Tulowitzki, Kendrys Morales are still a tough front four to get through. Wade Miley, no thanks on this slate. Aaron Sanchez, I like it because you look at Orioles, I mean, 21.5% strikeout rate against righties. I think Sanchez is obviously a talented arm, 20.4% strikeout rate. Walk rate is slightly above average, does roll a lot of ground balls, 53.6%. I think he's in a good spot here. I think there are better guys and not better guys, but better spots for other pitchers around the price range. So I think Sanchez gets lost for me a little bit here. I don't think it's a bad idea. It's just kind of more of a GPP pivot off of some guys like Tehran, Rick Porcello, and guys like kind of those similar prices. So that's kind of all he is on tonight's slate. Tigers and Indians, Trevor Bauer versus Daniel Norris. I don't want either part of these guys. Not to say that they're going to just completely blow up, but they're not really worth using at tonight's slate. Same goes for this next one with the Brewers and Reds. I know Scott Philman started off the year pretty well. I know the Brewers do strike out a ton. I'm still not buying into Feldman. I'm not really looking to use him here. Tommy Malone, no thanks. That ballpark, one of the higher totals on the night slate. And on the slate, you really got to hit your pitching and want that upside from, no thanks. Syndergaard and Edison Volquez, they're in Miami. I mean, Syndergaard's been off to an absolute electric start to start this season. 16 strikeouts. I mean, just struck out 9 in a prior game against Miami, allowed 1 earned, went 7 innings. 55, 43 FanDuel points in his first 2 here. Obviously, 20 plus on DK. This is where we get the spinoff. I mean, Kershaw, a reasonable $2,000 difference between Syndergaard and Kershaw on DraftKings, and you look at Kershaw. I mean, 2% bump here in K percentage, nearly identical swing strike rates. Walk rates are both exceptional. I mean, you look at Kershaw. I mean, dude's walking 2% of guys right now. They don't allow home runs. Ground ball rate solid. I mean, it's really tough to actually split these two guys here. I think Syndergaard's a reasonable tournament pick. I don't even mind just going with Syndergaard to save that extra cash in cash games. I know we kind of all love the Clayton and Kershaw or Clayton and Cash, all the time, but a $2,000 difference is a pretty big one on DraftKings. I mean, FanDuel, I think you can get away with just going up to Kershaw, but you know, you look at Arizona, still a tougher lineup, you could say, than Miami is, with a couple of those right-handed bats. But for the most part, I mean, Kershaw's going to dominate and Syndergaard's going to dominate. And if they come out to a near identical outcome tonight, I mean, the salary is actually going to be there for you on a full slate where you can use that to bump up an extra bat. So, you look at Syndergaard, like I said, I mean, dude's been unreal. In that spacious ballpark, he's a reasonable option in all formats, just depending on what you want to do and how your kind of lineup fits. So Volquez on the other side, no thanks. Moving on here, Rays and Red Sox, Rick Porcello versus Chris Archer. You look at Archer, I mean, has one of the elite strikeout rates, 27.1% going back to last year. Can be a little bit of a guy who can walk a couple guys here, 7.8% walk rate, 12.2% swing and strike rate. Home runs were a little bit of an issue, but that was mainly to lefties. And with that being said, I mean, Fenway Park is not a good park for left-handed power. So I do think Archer comes in and has a decent spot. You do look at Archer here, I mean, 9,100 on FanDuel, 8,400 on DK. I mean, it's not a bad option in this. The only thing that's really tough here is the matchup, because you do look at Boston. They don't strike out a ton. They are patient. So that's the only kind of downside to here. I can see him using him in GPPs, but definitely not a cash game guy. And I do think he's more of an SP2 in tournaments on DraftKings and Yahoo than anything. Rick Porcello, you look at this Rays team. I mean, the strikeout upside is absolutely huge with them. 24.2% strikeout rate. Yes, the power is there, but the power mainly comes from the left side. Once again, Fenway not that great for lefty power. In the Rays, I mean, overall 19th in WOBA. Porcello had a really strong outings against them last year. I think he's a fine option tonight in two pitcher sites. Not really looking to use him in FanDuel. I still rather bump up a couple thousand to a Syndergaard or Kershaw. But you do look at Porcello, 21.4% strikeout rate, doesn't walk guys, was excellent at Fenway Park, doesn't give up a ton of homers. So I do think he's a reasonable option in cash games on DK. I do even think the upside's there at 9,400 against this team that does strike out a ton. So with that being said, certainly in play tonight. Padres and Braves, Julius Chassin, not a guy that I'm looking at. Tehran, though, obviously a guy who's always pitched better at home. Does struggle a little bit with lefties, but obviously no one really in this lineup outside of basically Schimpf and Solarte that you can really call a decent lefty. And Schimpf is always a guy who gives you that strikeout upside too. So you look at the Padres, I mean, against right-handed pitching last year, dead last and well with 24.9% strikeout rate. Tehran's an excellent play in all formats on DraftKings, 8,500, really nice SP2 price for him. FanDuel, once again, basically, I just enjoy paying up for Syndergaard and Kershaw in cash games. But if you do want some bats and you do think that upside is going to be there and you can come close to those guys, I mean, the upside is certainly there for Tehran to dominate at a cheaper price. I'm okay with using him in tournaments. He's a good pay-down option to fit some bats in at this matchup. You look at Tehran last year, he does have the 7th best strikeout rate on the slate, double-digit swinging strike percentage, doesn't walk a ton of guys as well, and has actually kept the ball in the ballpark at a reasonable rate, 0.99 home runs per 9 going back to last year. So I do like him quite a bit. Padres one of the lower totals on the slate, so definitely an option for me to look at here. Chicago, Minnesota, there is weather concern here, but the weather concern isn't the concern. It's the arms on the hill. No use of using them. Angels and Royals next here. Danny Duffy versus JC Ramirez. Danny Duffy is just too expensive for me. The Angels just don't strike out enough for me to really use. 16.3%. They do walk quite a bit. Not to say Duffy's going to have a bad start, but neither of these arms are just really that intriguing to use on tonight's slate. Houston, Oakland, Kendall Graveman, Dallas Keuchel. Once again, Keuchel's kind of a similar thing where Oakland doesn't strike out a ton. You also just look against lefties. They do have a couple right-handers. Keuchel just probably going to go out there and toss you a quality start. It's probably not going to be a ton of upside. I don't even think he's a considerable tournament pivot just because the upside's not really there. Graveman, on the other hand, not a guy that I'm looking to use on tonight's slate. I know he's had a couple of decent outings. I know he might be an attractive SP2 on DraftKings, given the fact that he's had, 13 strikeouts over 2 starts, has allowed 3 earned runs. I'm still not particularly thrilled with using him here. Getting to Arizona, Los Angeles, Clayton Kershaw versus Zach Greinke. Greinke, not a big upside guy for me tonight. 8,800 on DK is intriguing. Quality start certainly in play. Win probably unlikely. You look at Clayton Kershaw, doesn't need much explanation here. 31% strikeout rate, missing about 15% of bats, 1.9% walk rate. Struggled in cores, yes. Looking at the Diamondbacks, I mean, against lefties, 348 WOBA last year, led the league. 23.3% strikeout rate, though. They did struggle quite a bit on the road. They were bottom half. That's one thing to consider. Kershaw, obviously, still the number one option, but no Syndergaard, very close tonight. Martin Perez, Felix Hernandez. I don't want any part of either of these arms. No thanks. Tyler Anderson, Johnny Cueto. Tyler Anderson hasn't gotten off to the best start this season. Pitched okay against Milwaukee, but still has given up 10 earned runs in 2 starts. This Giants lineup's bad right now, though. I mean, they do have a couple of righties there that are cheap value tonight. I'm not looking at Anderson, even in the spacious ballpark. I think he can toss a quality outing, but I'm not banking on that to happen. This is a night where I'm just really not looking to fool around with pitching. Johnny Cueto, interesting price on FanDuel. 9K compared to 11.6 on DraftKings, more than Noah Syndergaard. Yeah, I don't think so. I'd rather just go Syndergaard there. It just makes sense to do so. Really breaking it down here, I mean, it's Kershaw, Syndergaard at the top. You do have Rick Porcello, Julio Teheran, Chris Archer, Aaron Sanchez in that mid-range. If you do want to go with cheap options, if you do want to pay up for some bats as far as SP2 goes. Realistically, you're probably looking at guys like Tyler Anderson, maybe a Kendall Graveman, and that's about it right now. I mean, both those guys are both under 7K, so they kind of fit the bill there. But I still rather use a Teheran or an Archer if you're kind of going that route, or a Porcello. So that's kind of how it's going to round out. We probably narrowed it down to about 6 or 7 guys that are usable tonight, and kind of usable mostly in all formats. So it's going to wrap things up here. You can check out DailyFantasyCafe.com for all great tools and content.